What about his legacy then? How much do you think it's misrepresented? Because he's so closely tied with unscrupulous acts and betrayal and all types of manipulation. Is it fair that he's associated with these things? Would he almost be sort of proud that he's associated with these things, maybe with the caveat that it is for maybe an end good?
Interesting question. Well, it is the case that Machiavelli's work, The Prince, which is only one of his works, has dominated the way in which he's been perceived down the centuries. As we've already explored, it can be read in lots of different ways.
Yeah.
And most often it has been seen as a defense of immoral nastiness, wickedness, etc., etc. And that has tended to cloud the way a lot of people see him, even amongst scholars who see it as a major work of political thought and who are inclined to see it as a very original, daring work of realpolitik, which points the way towards reason of state. As I said, there is a tendency to see that as the be-all and end-all of his life. Reality is quite different. I think he'd be quite pleased for people to think that he was this brilliant political genius who had
people speaking about him 500 years later. Yeah, I'd be thrilled.
Sure, he'd be delighted about that, no doubt. I don't think he was writing for posterity, but I think he would be pleased with that. However, his life does not suggest that he was a political savant. It doesn't show very many signs of cunning, intrigue, and political sophistication at all. Quite the reverse. As I sort of adumbrated in my initial comments, he actually made a spectacular number of mistakes throughout his life. His early diplomatic missions, where he was a bit, he was a bit inexperienced, admittedly, but his early diplomatic missions were fraught with missteps. One of his first missions was to a woman called Caterina Sforza, one of the most remarkable women of her day, and he just doesn't pick up on the hint she's dropping and keeps getting things wrong. So she has to send people to say, "Look, chum, just do what we're saying, and it'll be okay. But just keep stum until then. Just say what we say, and that's it." Then later on, he always seems to be, so far as Florentine politics is concerned, doing the wrong thing at the wrong time in the wrong way. He is a civil servant, essentially. It's important to make that absolutely clear. And there were many of his colleagues, including notionally his boss, Marco di Virgilio Adriani, who tried to remain above the political fray, tried to remain a little bit objective, and who actually survived at the return of the Medici in 1512. But Machiavelli becomes more and more closely identified with the popular regime that becomes headed by a guy called Soderini, and he really puts all his chips on Soderini's regime and on the continuity of the Popular Republic just before the Medici come back. So he's doing the wrong thing at the wrong time. Then when the Medici fall, he shoots his mouth off about what fools they are and keeps the wrong company. So he's in prison. And he spends a long time, a hugely long time, trying to get back in with the Medici. And just when they trust him, they fall again. And he thinks, okay, well, never mind. I've still got loads of chums that I made during my period in the wilderness who are now coming to positions of dominance. Surely they'll give me a job in the new regime. But it's too late. By that point, he's politically radioactive. He can't be touched at that point. So he's always in the wrong place at the wrong time. He's also quite often rebuked by colleagues and superiors because of some of his ideas. he goes on a lot of diplomatic missions to France, to Rome. He goes to meet Cesare Borgia in Urbino and in several other parts of northern Italy. And he's left behind a great number of diplomatic letters, volumes and volumes and volumes of thousands of letters. So we can follow his thoughts and his ideas quite closely, often on an hour-by-hour basis. And he can't resist half the time going beyond his remit, whereas he's supposed simply to report what's going on. He quite often goes off on a tangent and says, well, if I was in your position, this is what I'd do, and this is what I think he's thinking, and this is what's going on. And quite often his superiors and colleagues back in France have to write to him and say, look, just stop this, please. We'll do the thinking. You just tell us what's going on. And with reason, more often, well, not more, several occasions, he's actually getting things a bit off. He's not always wrong, but he's often not seeing the whole picture.
It's funny and also very interesting to hear that, because I love when you think about like these great men that you read about and hear about, and it's great to see what they are within the context of their own time, and they're not these just overly exceptional people, or like in some cases the quiet genius who's always been retorted by society, but nonetheless are just so exceptional in their own right. It sounds like Machiavelli was clearly exceptional, because he was the historian of Florence at one stage. He's involved in the politics. Like, he's not just he's not a just completely forgettable character of history, but still at the time, it sounds like people didn't necessarily consider him this exceptional person. In fact, maybe he was just another bureaucrat that people had to sort of deal with.
I think there's a lot in that, actually. Machiavelli was relatively well thought of by his contemporaries. He kept the company of some extraordinary men who we still remember today. He was a very good friend of Francesco Guicciardini, the great historian of Italy. He knew Cesare. He had some contact with Michelangelo. Michelangelo delivers things for him at one stage. He's involved with some really extraordinary people, and they think highly of him for good reasons. But 2 points to make. He is a human being, as you rightly say. When we think about great men, quite often they seem to be, carved out of marble, exactly. Inhabiting this ethereal realm where they are untroubled by daily concerns. They don't bother with the things that you and I.
They were so committed to whatever their destiny was.
Exactly. But as is so often the case, it's not true of Machiavelli. He is a very fallible, very human person. When you look at the letters he left behind, you see loads of evidence of that. He loves, a good drink and a laugh with his mates. He really does. He's always going out gambling and playing and laughing and joking, going to a brothel with his friends, etc. He has no end. He has loads of children. He loves his wife very much, but he has loads of affairs with girls.
His sexual exploits was surprising to hear about as well.
Oh yeah, there are some stories that would rather make the eyes water. I don't know whether you want to put the particularly gory example.
Well, you can't tease me with that and then not give the gory example.